Okay, so I'm not going to follow Stuart's lead in trying to talk about a really clever use of the conservation standards, and because Stuart killed it, so that's I wouldn't try to compete with that. I'm going to talk about games, and game. The reason I like games is the reason I like games is because I'm actually a child in a man's body, and I kind of really love games. And I think that games have a huge potential for us to to enable social learning, and all of the stuff that we do around conservation is about social decisions and social learning. When I taught at Tufts University, all my undergraduates and graduate students, and I would teach about unsustainable fisheries because I'm in Massachusetts and most of the unsustainability stuff happens offshore with unsustainable fisheries. And we talk about unsustainable fisheries, and all my students would say, "Oh my goodness, how stupid could fishers be to over harvest their fisheries? Are they nuts? That's like depriving their children from a future. Are they crazy? What kind of bonkers decisions are those? That's nuts." And every time they played Dennis Meadows' Fish Banks game, even although they knew that the whole purpose of the course was about unsustainability, what do you think my students did? They unsustainably fished the fishery. And they were appalled that even although they knew that the game was about sustainable fisheries, they made decisions that trashed the fishery. So I have been in love with sustainable use games, but never had a period of time in my life to try and actually make some. So the next 15 minutes is about David's endeavors to actually develop and test in Central Africa and Madagascar a couple of sustainable use games. So when I talk to our field staff about how easy is it, sustainable management, that's what we're really into. We want to have sustainable use. We know that people depend on natural resources, and we hope that communities use resources sustainably. So the question is that an easy problem? And every time I talk to my field staff, they go, "No, it's not." They say, "No, that's a really tricky problem." I talk about food production, particularly food production in relation to alternatives to eating wildlife that are unsustainably produced. And I guess I ask the same question: is that easy? And no, it's not. And the answer is it isn't. It really isn't. So and this is a perspective from my organization, the Wildlife Conservation Society, so I know it's not necessarily all of the CMP members. But what WCS spends a lot of time in is working with local communities to really think about what their current practices are, what they would like to achieve, what their aspirations are currently not being achieved, and what help they might need from a community support partner that might be WCS or somebody else to help them achieve their aspirations, to sustainably manage wildlife that is meaningful to them for food and income and cultural identity, and to production of other things that is essential for livelihood security. So we were trying to figure out what is the best way to help local communities who ask for our help, to help them support their efforts to do what they want to do. And usually what we come up with is training. Oh yes, let's do some training. And training often means manuals, and manuals guide the training. Okay, no, those are good. And in many cases, training and manuals can be incredibly useful, but often they're very David lecturing to somebody else. They're not very participatory. And then we thought, okay, let's do something more interactive. Let's do videos. Let's do some really, really cool animations and videos. And that will really capture people, and they will really, really, that will help them solve the things that they're challenged with. And man, we thought even really fantastic trainers who interact with their teams and with the communities, and even fantastic videos. Honestly, I don't think they really get it, because I don't think they're getting at the decision-making challenges that communities have to make in a way that's safe and experimental. So we think at WCS, and I guess at lots of other places, that low-tech multiplayer decision-making games might be an answer. I've looked at lots and lots of games, and lots of games are actually designed by academics to teach their undergraduates and graduates really cool things. But they typically involve AI, laptops, literacy, a whole bunch of things that most of the communities that WCS works with don't have access to. So we're focusing on low-tech games, multiplayer games, and decision-making games, because we think it involves participatory learning, not passive learning. When you do trainings, there's a dumbass white guy lecturing to a bunch of other people like me. Horrible way. There's great videos, but it's still passive learning. The great thing about games is it's active participatory learning. We think that games can use simple rules but tackle really, really complex situations. Games are often accused of being overly simplified and not related to reality. But I think well-conjured games can actually deal with really, really complex issues that communities are dealing with every day, and that manuals and training and videos just don't capture. I think games are really cool because players actually see the consequences of their decisions. Every time they make a decision, instantaneously they go, oh shit, that was a crap decision. Or wow, that was a good decision. So they see players see instantaneously, when she made a decision about poultry production, oh, that was horrible. When he made a decision about poultry production, crap, that was horrible. When she made a decision about fisheries, god damn, that was great. So instantaneously, you get to see players get to see that their decisions have consequences. Players can get to experiment with no cost. My gosh, when I lecture, there's no experimentation. When we do videos, there's no experimentation. But in games are all about experimentation, trying things and seeing what the consequences are. And the next time you play it, you do something different and you hope the outcomes are different. That's why games are really cool. Players and audiences laughing and learning. Oh, as a teacher, when I've had an impact on my students, it's been when they've had fun. When I've bored them to tears, and man, I have bored hundreds and hundreds of students to tears. When I've made them laugh and have fun, they have come back to me and said, Dr. Wilkie, that was the best lecture I've ever had. When students have fun, when players have fun, people learn. So I think games are really cool. So I'm going to talk about two games. One is a hunting sustainability game, and the next one is about a poultry production game. Now, that's two totally different things. One's about sustainable wildlife management, and one is about sustainable food security. But I think games still apply to both. So here is this low-tech, no-tech game that we developed in Madagascar, Northern Congo, and Eastern DRC. It stupidly uses beans as representing animals. It allows progressively more realistic representations of reality. And games, all games are a model of reality. They're not reality. But the great thing about games is you can make them more and more complex with more and more complex rules and more and more complex conditions that they approach reality. So progressively, so this bean game initially can just talk about unsustainable use. Did you trash the hunting population just by playing the game? And 9 times out of 10 in the simplest game, all the hunters consume all the wildlife before they even finish the game. You can include things like, do hunters have information about how many animals are in the wild and how many animals hunters take? And in many places that's not known. And when you provide hunters with information about how many animals are in the field, in the wild, and how many animals hunters are taking, they make different decisions. You can do things like spatial rotation. So hunting doesn't often occur in the same space. Spaces move around both temporally and spatially. So you can use a bean counting game that allows spatial rotation. That's really cool. You can do hunts that are single species hunts. So we're only going to hunt a specific species of grouse, or you're going to hunt everything that's in the forest. You can make these games so they represent the kind of hunting that happens in the place that you're working in. That's also really cool. And you can do things where individual hunters make individual decisions. I'm a hunter, I will choose where I hunt and how much I hunt. Or you can do it where hunters have to talk to one another and make decisions about how are we as a group of hunters going to hunt. So even a simple thing like a hunting game that uses beans to represent animals, you can create incredibly complex situations that include transparency and communication and spatial rotation. You wouldn't imagine that from a game that's just made from a group of beans presented to hunters. And it can even deal with things like search costs. You could put search costs are really important in hunting. When animals get scarce, it takes you longer to find an animal. So how do you do that in a game? Well, rather than having the beans in a bowl, what if you put the beans in a pile of sand that they can't see the beans and they have to go and use their hands to try and find the beans? You can even do a simple bean hunting game that deals with the most complicated thing in conservation, which is dealing with things like search costs. So a simple bean game can be incredibly complicated, but with rules that we've worked with hunter-gatherers in Madagascar, in Ituri, in DR Congo, and in Northern Congo, and everyone has got the game so quickly because the rules are simple and they've had a hell of a time playing it and they've learned a lot. So Muchezo Yokuku is actually how do you raise chickens? And so many families and so many villages in all the villages I ever met try to raise chickens. Awesome. And their productivity is in the basement because they don't have resources to create hen houses. They lose hens through disease. They buy chickens that are diseased. there's a whole reason for people to make unfortunate decisions about poultry production. And the great thing about a poultry game is you can encourage people using playing cards, and here are a series of different characters that might be in a playing card. Here's a chicken, here's disease, here's a vaccination. This guy is the chicken thief. Here's a hen house, here's some chicken food, here's some chicks. Here's another predator. So you can create a game where when you draw a card, the poultry producers have to make a decision. What am I going to do with that card? What decision am I going to make in order to create the largest flock possible? Jesus, I should have written this down. And the interesting thing is that the game is won by those who have the largest flock. But what we actually find is players lose most of their animals during the game because they didn't buy a hen house to protect them from predators. They didn't pay for vaccines to avoid Newcastle disease. They didn't buy food for their chicks, and their chicks died. And so by playing this poultry game, it allows entrepreneurs who want to start backyard poultry production to learn the kind of decisions that they need to make and they have to make if they want to have a sustainable flock. We're now working in northern Congo on a small ruminant game, a small livestock game, because chickens are not the only thing that people raise. It's in its infancy. It's built on the poultry production game. It has to be different because the threats and the challenges to raising sheep and goats are quite different. But I still think this has a huge potential for social learning within communities where we care about wildlife management and we care about sustainable food production. Thanks, guys. Sorry, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask David?
David, this is Nick. Good.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, David, you need to take the in-person cool low-tech thing and turn it into a high-tech online version so we all can play online.
Sorry, Nick. If you're raising chickens in your backyard outside Washington, D.C., you have plenty of resources to figure out how to do that.
David, yeah, I agree with a note here from Caroline that you need to bring some of those games to the CMP retreat. And
yes, we in Madagascar, there's a couple of things that happened in Madagascar with the poultry game. One was people had a great time, and in 3 villages out of 7, 3 of the villages said, "Please leave the cards because we want to play the game when you're not here." And when we went back 3 weeks later, 7 more people in one village and 13 more people in another village had built a hen house. And we went, holy crap, we actually hadn't told people to build hen houses. But people from playing the game thought that building a hen house was a good idea. And we were pretty stunned, to be honest. Very cool. Ryan, did you have a question?
For sure, yeah. Thank you for the presentation. So I saw for the harvest or for the wildlife hunting slide that you had an image that looked like a WCS document. I was wondering, do you make the rules for the game publicly available on your website, or is that something that you, as an organization, keep a little bit more private?
No. all of this stuff should be on the website. The manuals in French and English for the poultry production should be online. I will share with Caroline the URLs for each of those. And at the moment, the English version for the hunting should also be available. And we're doing a French version for the hunting, and hopefully eventually a Spanish, Portuguese, a Bahasa version for hunting, and a Spanish, Portuguese, and Bahasa version for the poultry. No, everything that WCS produces is public domain. Nothing is private.
David, there is one
sorry, Ryan. The design of our reports is absolutely shit. I swear to God, it's like a teenager developed the reports, and that's because I designed the reports. So don't expect them to be highly polished manuals. No. But they are in the public domain, and they are, we believe, because our teams have said, yes, that's what we did, and that's how you should train other people to use them. So when you get a hold of the manual, you should be able to replicate what we did. It's just not very pretty, okay?
It'd be great to learn more, David, about how to design these simple games for different contexts. Like, it'd be great to design something for like climate smart agriculture decisions under different contexts, or expanding agriculture under different climate scenarios.
Oh, Erica, so you think that might be a new a CMP working group? Oh my gosh, that's a very good idea, I think.
The game working group?
Yes.
The no tech?
Well done,
I'll
Erica. That, my gosh, I would never have thought about that. That's awesome.
So we do have one question in the chat and a hand up. Quickly, I'll read off the question in the chat, which is, do you have any evidence that the game changed behavior?
So yes, in the poultry example, yes, we have very good evidence that people actually began to do things that they hadn't done before, like building hen houses, places to protect their poultry from predators and from thieves. That's very cool. In the hunting game, gosh, guys, hunting groups, how to try and help hunting communities to work together to solve a common problem is an enormously challenging problem. And all I can say about the hunting stuff in terms of change behavior is some of the quotes that we had, and you'll see in the hunting manual, and I'll share with Caroline the URLs for the manuals. You'll see in the hunting manual, there's a bunch of quotes, and some of the quotes are pretty telling. So during one game, one of the audience said, it's the game players and there's an audience, and we try and encourage a big audience because the whole idea is about social learning. And one of the persons in the audience went, and I'm gonna beep out the person's name, but it was Papa. His snares. He's hunted out all the animals in our land. So the fact that during a community game, one of the audience called out one of the people in the community, basically saying, "That's right, he's the guy that stiffed us from all our food." Another person gave a great thing. In northern Congo, someone said, "Doesn't this tell you we have to listen to our elders? Because when they hunted, they agreed on how many animals to take, so that the animals would still be there for their children and their children." So no, I don't have any evidence that it's changed behavior on the hunting side. I do have evidence that it's changed behavior on the poultry side, but I certainly think it got conversations going on the hunting side.
All right, thank you. We'll turn it over to Helen for her question.
Thank you. No, well, it was exactly that, really, on whether there'd been a behavior change seen, because you said that, or we just happened to see them building a hen house. So would be really nice to see how long that lasts as well, how long that behavior change and how often they keep on playing the game. But no, I think that was a really interesting talk. Thank you. You've resolved that question.
And Helen, the greatest thing about the most important thing about the hunting game is it starts off, currently we have three versions of the hunting game, and each version is 2 scenarios. And we try and repeat, we try and do all 3 versions at different, so we start with the first version, and then we come back a few months later, we do the second version hopefully with the same game players and the same audience, and then we do the third version. And the reason we do that is because the first version is really, really abstract. It's the simplest rules and the simplest outcomes. And then we add reality in each subsequent version. And we found that others who try and bring reality at its best, the most real games right at the beginning, the rules are so complicated that the players don't understand what the rules are. So you have this trade-off. So all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And that goes with games. So a very simple game is wrong, but it can encourage discussions. The next game, slightly less simple and slightly more real, provokes different discussions. The third game, very, very much more close to what the actual communities are doing in terms of hunting, it is much more complicated, but the players have played 2 games beforehand, and they're becoming much more accustomed to games, because most game players are non-literate, they've never used a cell phone, and that's why we do low-tech games, because we're not dealing with college students. But doing 3 different versions of a game where the game becomes more and more realistic allows players and the audience to go, well, son of a bitch, that's a lot more like what we do. And wow, we need to talk about that. So that's really cool.
Can I ask as well, how easy was it to get them involved? You know, when you sort of approach
impossibly
can you play this card game that's really difficult, please?
Impossibly easy. I mean, can I have 1 second to show my screen again, just that quickly that. Sorry, just one.
Go ahead. We started a few minutes late, so take a couple minutes. And there's a couple questions that are showing up in the chat too that might have to take answers offline.
All right. So all I want to do is show one photograph. So you guys see this image of people playing the poultry game in Madagascar. It wasn't hard at all to get people to play games, and I gave a presentation to WCS last week, and one of my colleagues said, "Don't you think it was paternalistic to try and play games with adults?" And I go, "Holy crap! I play games all the time. I do crosswords. I play poker." It's like, no, games are things adults do, not they're not just children things. And look how much fun those adults were having playing a card game. And when somebody lost all their chickens, Helen, what do you think the whole audience did?
Gasped in shock?
No, they burst into hysterics. They laughed. They thought it was the funniest thing that someone lost all their hens. This was a game that was fun, but this was a game that was a social learning game. So no, it was incredibly easy. And as I said, for the poultry game, 3 of the villages basically asked us to leave the cards with them because they wanted to play the games when we weren't there.